Councillors Allison, Anderson, Brown, Carmichael, Chalmers, Clark, Convery. We don't have Councillor Cooper at the moment, but I think she'll be joining a bit late. We have apologies from Councillor Cowan and Councillor Johnson-Dempsey as substituting. We have present Councillors Devlin, Fagan, Ferguson-Miller, Frame, Hamilton, Kerr, Logan, Loudon, McAllen, McClymont, McCreary, Leslie MacDonald, McLachlan, Nelson, Ray. We have apologies for Councillor Razak and Councillor Cowie substituting. And we have present Councillors Robb, Ross, Shearer and Walker. And I'll hand back to the Chair for business.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to item 1, which are declarations of interest? Can I ask if anyone has any declarations of interest to make? Could you make them now? Okay, not seeing any. So could I move to item 2, which are the minutes of the previous meeting? Are there any questions on the minutes of the previous meeting? Not seen any questions on the previous meeting, so can I ask that we agree these as a correct record? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
We're agreed. I'll come now to item 3, which is our revenue budget monitoring report for period 8, and I'll invite Jackie Taylor to speak to that item. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This is our regular revenue budget monitoring report. This is taking us to the 1st of November 2024. At section 4 of the report, we're picking up what our projected position for the year is on our revenue budget, and that is an underspend of £8.9 million. Section 4.2 goes into a bit more detail, and as we reported last month as part of our 25-26 budget update, we are expecting, through our early outturn work, an underspend in utilities and council tax collection. That totals £5.3 million. We also have pay award funding that will be set aside to contribute towards the 25-26 pay award costs. Those things make that underspend of £8.9 million that I mentioned. Moving over to section 4.4, we are picking up on a number of key areas in the rest of this report. Firstly, teacher numbers. I can provide an update on the information that's in this report. The census has now been published around teacher numbers, and we have had clarity from the Scottish Government that no financial sanctions will be applied for 2024-25 for those councils whose teacher numbers have reduced. For 2025-26, we are looking for assurance around the expectation on how our teacher numbers base level will be monitored, and whether the reductions that we have seen this year will still receive the mitigation that we had asked for, that we are allowed to see that reduction in our base level of teachers. Picking up on the employer's pension contribution increase for teachers at section 4.8, we have been reporting for a while that we've been awaiting information around funding for this, and we have now had clarification on how we will receive funding for this. That will come in as part of our general revenue grant at the end of the financial year. At section 4.9, just a reference to living wage. The Living Wage Foundation announced in October that the real living wage was increasing to £12.60 per hour. Just to give some comfort in terms of the council's pay model, our minimum hourly rate is currently £12.82, and that sits above the real living wage level. Therefore, there's no change required to our gradings at this point in time. Section 5 of the report picks up the housing revenue account, and we are reporting a projected break-even position on the housing revenue account for the year. If I can take you back now to the recommendations, we're asking that the general fund revenue account position is noted, and also that the position around the housing revenue account is also noted. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, just bear with us a wee second there. We were we've sorted an issue there with the microphone settings. Okay. Can I ask if there are any questions in that report? Could you please indicate now? And I have a question from Robert Brown.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Jackie, I know, has elaborated a little bit on the teacher numbers matter, but we seem to be in a position where there's maximum inconvenience for minimum output, if I can put it that way, in the sense that this has been hanging over the budget for the best part of the financial year. It makes planning arrangements much more difficult, and we've ended up in a position, according to the national reports, where the national teacher numbers in any event at the national level have dropped Now, we're going to have the same again in 25-26 by the looks of things, because we still don't have clarity on that one. I wonder if there's any kind of update at the COSLA level on discussions on this matter. It's really been an ongoing saw for a bit, so maximum pain and minimum advantage, it seems to me, at the end of the day.
Yes, so I think on that there have been further developments within the last 24 hours and developments since the papers in front of you had been published. I'll maybe come back to Jackie just to, it might be useful to go over that again and just put in place the developments that there had been prior to, basically prior to the last 24 hours.
Yeah, of course. So up until yesterday, what we had been advised was that we would be told once the census was published what the situation was for the current financial year and any financial sanctions that would be put in place if teacher numbers had dropped. The census was published yesterday and we received a letter to say that there would be no sanctions applied for 24-25. You're correct that a number of councils had seen reductions in teacher numbers. Throughout the year, we have been asking the Scottish Government for some form of comfort that the mitigations that we have in place that explain why our teacher numbers have reduced for the year would be acceptable to the Scottish Government and would mean that we wouldn't see any penalties this year. We haven't had any formal response yet on those letters that we have sent to the Scottish Government to say that they were accepting those mitigations. So at the moment, whilst we know that the financial position for 24-25 will be that we will get the funding that was promised around teacher numbers, we don't yet have clarity that in 25-26 that the reduction in teacher numbers that we've experienced this year won't still be a problem. At the moment, the narrative around next year's position is that 2023 teacher levels would be the baseline that councils could be measured against. That would be, we would still see a reduction next year in our teacher numbers compared to our 2023 position, reflecting how our teacher numbers have moved this year, if that makes sense. So we are very keen that we do still get that comfort that the reasons that our teacher numbers have reduced are acceptable and that it doesn't mean that we're having to increase teacher numbers again next year off the back of that. As part of the letter that we got from the Scottish Government yesterday, they are asking us to explain the reasons for the reduction in teacher numbers. We will do that again. We will reiterate the reasons for that and again push for that comfort that they are acceptable and that we won't be expected to reinstate those teachers going forward. Okay,
just to add to that, so my concern about this is that we have been seeking for a number of months, actually a considerable number of months, some written assurance that the mitigations that we have in place are appropriate or would be accepted. Let me rephrase that the circumstances that we find ourselves in would represent a valid mitigation. Although we are not being sanctioned in any way and we believe the position that we are in represents a valid mitigation, we actually haven't had that confirmed in writing, which is my concern and something I've pushed for at COSLA and elsewhere. And where that takes on a new significance in the context of the developments over the past 24 hours, as Jackie says, isn't now about the financial year that we are in just now, it's about the coming financial year. So, and potentially implications for the budget that we're about to set. And it comes in that wider, we've got an update on the kind of budget lobbying position later, but I think there are a number of key things for me, but let me just draw in one of them that we come back to every year, which is that if we are asked to take on any new responsibilities by government, or if we are asked to adhere to certain policies by government, if there is any element of our budget that is to be ring-fenced or directed, then we expect that to be fully funded so that there isn't a contagion effect on that core bit of the budget, because it feels like we made a lot of progress in actually getting the Scottish Government now to understand that the core bit of the budget has to rise, but that can be offset by lots of unanticipated costs of other policies that are set elsewhere. So this is going to be continued area of dialogue between ourselves and COSLA and the Scottish Government. Okay, Robert, yes.
Briefly, I mean, that's all fine as far as it goes, but I mean, it's the planning here that's the problem. You know, I mean, the Scottish Government have got a legitimate right in interest in teacher numbers overall. I don't think one would dispute that. But they've got to do it in such a way that makes it possible for councils to actually achieve what they're actually looking for in that connection. We're all interested in teacher numbers and in the adequate staffing of schools and different ways that go about, but it ultimately should be a decision for local level. We're supposed to have a thing called the Verity House Agreement, aren't we? And that was all about you know, collaboration, partnership. It must be a position that we end up knowing before the start of the financial year what on earth we're dealing with in this context so that planning can go ahead in that context. I take it, incidentally, we don't get any interest on the money that's owed to us in terms of the outstanding teacher numbers.
I'll leave that one in the air. Councillor Allison?
Yeah, sorry, Jackie, just to be clear, as far as I'm aware, there are two areas where teacher numbers have varied. One was where we took on teachers in a short-term contract after COVID. I'm also right in thinking that Scottish Government funding for newly qualified teachers reduced, and therefore we were unable to take on as many there. Is that part of this calculation? And is that not a bit the pot calling the kettle black if they're not giving us funding to actually take these teachers on?
Yeah, you're correct. That's the two reasons why we've seen a reduction in our teacher numbers. Both valid reasons for reducing teacher numbers. We've not made conscious decisions to make savings around teacher numbers. The reasons that we have reduced our teacher numbers are the ones you explained. So that's very much why we have hoped that we will get clarification from the Scottish Government that those reasons are valid and that will not be expected to reinstate teachers at a cost to ourselves going forward to maintain a level of teacher numbers that we're asked to do.
Are there any other questions on this paper? There are not, so can I just draw us back to the recommendations? We'll note that paper. Can I come now to item 4, which is the Capital Budget Monitoring Report? Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. So we're now on to our capital budget monitoring. This is taking us to the same period, the 1st of November. At section 4, we're reporting that the General Fund capital programme is £69.8 million, and that includes adjustments that are included in the appendix, which I'll cover in a second. In terms of our forecast, that's covered at section 4.4. We are expecting at this point in time an underspend of around £700,000. And that's in relation to underspends on 3 roads projects that are detailed there at section 4.5. Given these are roads-related projects, the budget will be carried forward and considered for roads capital projects as part of the capital programme for 25-26. We intend to report the proposed programme for 25-26 to members in February. Also at section 4.6, we're just commenting that we have had recent confirmation of levelling up funding for the Three Rivers Clydesdale Way project. Now that that money is received, officers are working to establish a spend profile, which may result in some underspend this year having to be carried forward at the end of the financial year, and we'll confirm that at year end. The actual spend position to the 1st of November is £21.1 million. Section 5 picks up our housing programme. We have a programme of £77.2 million for housing. In terms of our forecast for the year, we expect an outturn of £72.1 million. That is an underspend expected of just over £5.1 million. And that's a result of delays in site starts at Cairnswell Avenue, Cambuslang and Brackenhill Farm in Hamilton, and also as a result of market purchase scheme properties where the average purchase price has actually been less than we had budgeted for. We will look at opportunities to try and maximise spend this year, but anything unspent this year will be carried forward into the new financial year. In terms of actual spend for housing, we've spent £29.5 million to date. If I take you to Appendix 1, the adjustments that are proposed are detailed here. Firstly, the Priory Changing Pavilion in Blantyre, we're looking to slip £236,000 into the new financial year, and that reflects the timescales for the projects. That's a project that was allocated funding as part of the last Executive Committee paper on the Leisure and Cultural Transformation Fund. In a similar vein, Lanark Library is the second item where we're looking to realign the spend profile of that project, again now following the fact it's had funding allocated from the Transformation Fund. So £442,000 will be required to be spent in the next financial year. Works at Langlands West have been delayed just due to the timing of concluding works at Greenhills Road. So therefore, we're looking to slip £450,000 into next financial year, again reflecting the timescales for that project. And Hamilton Junction's upgrade, following on from conversations with the contractor, due to their availability and the need to avoid other scheduled works, it's now anticipated that works will commence in January 2025, so the project will now straddle financial years. Therefore, we require to slip £3.3 million into the new financial year to reflect the timescales for that project. In terms of Clyde Bridge, that project is now substantially complete. There is a requirement to make a retention payment next financial year of £192,000. So we'll move money into next year to cover that cost. On page 29 at the top of the page, we have Hairmyres Station Park and Ride. You remember from previous reports, we have a funding package for that. We are looking to make sure that we're reflecting the correct profile of spend over the financial years. So £1.4 million is required in financial year 25-26 to complete those works. And in the housing and technical resources space, we have funding for alarms moving from analogue to digital. Again, reflecting timescales to undertake assessments and to work with providers to make the necessary changes to alarm systems. There is expected now to be limited spend this financial year, and we will slip £607,000 into next financial year, again to reflect the timescales of that project. The rest of the appendices to the report pick up on the breakdown of the capital programme over resources, and also the funding for the programme is picked up on page 31 in Appendix 3. In terms of the housing programme funding, that's picked up in Appendix 4. So if I can take you back to the recommendations, we're asking that the General Fund Capital Programme and the Housing Capital Programme position is noted, that the adjustments that I've just gone through there in Appendix 1 are approved, and also just to note that the programme continues to be monitored by the Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions on this report? I'm not seeing any questions. Can we agree the recommendations? Agreed. We're agreed. Can I come now to item 5, which is on an update to funding, and can I come back to Jackie to speak to that item?
Thank you very much. This is our usual report, just picking up on any additions to funding that we've received in the last period. There's a total of £10.1 million that we're reporting as part of this report, and they're detailed in Appendix 1. Firstly, it's £4.5 million of funding that has been received in relation to this year's pay offer. Again, that was expected and built into our budgets. We've now had clarification that we will get that in. And also, as I mentioned in the first report that I presented today, that money for teachers' pension costs, £5.5 million, will now be received in year to cover the additional costs of that. And in terms of the recommendations, we're just asking that that's noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions on that paper? I'm not seeing any questions. Can we just note the recommendations then? Agreed. And I'll come now to item 6, which is on the Glasgow City Region City deal. It's a paper on Centre West, the outline business case, and David Booth is going to speak to this item. David.
Thank you very much, Chair. This report sets out the outline business case for the Centre West project in East Kilbride and advises committee on the next steps in developing and delivering the project. The Centre West project is one of the Council's City Deal funded projects formed through the rescoping of the original Stewartfield Way Capacity Enhancement project as agreed at Executive Committee on the 8th of May of this year, and it is an integral part of the master plan for East Kilbride Town Centre. Heads of terms for the transfer of Centre West from the Town Centre administrators to the Council were agreed at the Community and Enterprise Resources Committee on the 13th of November, and the project has now progressed to an outline business case stage as detailed in sections 4.4 and 4.5 of the report. The production of the outline business case is a key milestone and provides a basis for further development of the project. It is scheduled to be presented to the City Region Cabinet on the 25th of February 2025, and its approval will be conditional on the Executive Committee approval being given today. The delivery timeline is summarised in 5.1 of the report and outlines the key milestones for the Centre West project and covers possession, decommissioning and demolition of Centre West and the construction of the Civic Hub and housing from October 2027 onwards. A multidisciplinary team is supporting this work as is outlined in 6.2 of the report. The total cost of the Centre West project is estimated at £50.3 million, and a summary of the anticipated expenditure and funding is contained in the Table 1 of the report at page 40. Of principal note within this is the realisation of an additional £11.1 million of City Deal monies. This is the Council's share as part of the reallocation of the City Deal Glasgow Airport access monies, which will be considered at the City Region Cabinet in February of next year. There is an expectation by Glasgow City Region that this funding will be utilised to secure the delivery of existing City Region projects, and the Centre West project falls within that category as a key part of the East Kilbride Town Centre Master Plan. The committee is asked today to approve the use of this funding. The risks and initial sustainability considerations are considered in points 9.1 and 9.2 of the report. And 9.3 of the report highlights the time-critical nature of the proposed funding solution, with the City Region Cabinet meeting in February 2025 as being a key date. With that, I refer you back to section 2 of the report and ask committee to approve the outline business case for the Centre West East Kilbride project. That's subject to the City Region's reallocation of the £11.1 million of the Glasgow Airport Access project to the Council, that the funding is approved for the delivery of the Centre West project as set out in paragraph 7.2, that the proposed next steps in developing the project are approved, that grant funding be sought in accordance with the City Deal grant distribution process outlined in the assurance framework in relation to the preliminary costs, and that the relevant full business cases for the project and associated sub-projects be developed for future presentation to Executive Committee and City Region Cabinet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in that report? Could you indicate now? I will come to Councillor Anderson.
Like you chairs having a wee bit of problem with the microphone. Thanks, Chair. I think it's vitally important that we get this right for the future of East Kilbride Shopping Centre. And I think we've already seen the first plan fail at its first hurdle. When sometimes you try to put a vision into reality. We've had to relocate the Civic Hub out of the shopping centre to the periphery of the centre, losing approximately 100 houses in the process. So how does that impact on the value of the price that we're selling the Centre West? The Civic Hub will house community arts and leisure facilities, including the arts venue, performance space, library, office space. How many car parking spaces will be provided for the Civic Hub in its new home out with the shopping centre? The Centre West will also have some 300 houses built on it. How many off-road car parking spaces will be required for those houses or flats? And will the new Civic Square and streetscape be relocated to Centre West, or will the council be paying a lease to have this as part of the town centre? And can I ask how many car parking spaces will be left for those wishing to shop at the centre, excluding those for the new supermarket and hotel? And can ask, what is the timescale for a new civic hub to be built? And is there money ring-fenced for this project? At one time, I was informed that it would take up to 10 years for this to be done as part of the actual town centre. And is there a contingency fund built into the project's overall cost of 50 million? And what will happen if it runs over this cost? What will be sacrificed? Because we've just heard there in the capital monitoring, the Lanark Library had to be increased by £210,000. The priority pavilion at Blantyre would increase the budget by £250,000. So it's not without sort of belief that this project might overrun. And on another issue, given that the works are going to be at both ends of the current town centre, with the hotel and supermarket at one end, the civic hub and the housings at the other end, there's also going to be work on the Stuartfield Way project, which will mean severe disruption to the main artery in and out of East Kilbride from the Willies to Kingsgate. Well, and also work at the Civic Centre. Will all this work be going on at the same time? And how long will the works be lasting for? Thanks.
Okay, can I ask David, I mean, there are quite a few questions in that, and I think there are also some elements that will have to be corrected. Can I ask either David to pick that up, and we've got other officers in the room that may wish to come in as well. David.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'll try and answer what I can. I may have to ask other officers to answer as well. I suppose if the first thing I would say is I wouldn't necessarily agree that the master plan has failed. When we're doing these master plans for things like town centres or big, massive regenerative projects like that, the master plan is a vision at a particular time, and often these master plans need to change as projects develop because it depends on a whole range of other factors such as funding and such. So the master plan is a vision, an outline of what could be possible. I think what we're beginning to see now is the realisation of a vision, and this will twist and change on a number of occasions as we go through. The idea being that vision of regenerating East Kilbride Town Centre and East Kilbride remains true to what we're trying to achieve here. In terms of your questions regarding car parking spaces, we just are not at that stage where we would know that detail, Councillor Anderson, in terms of how many spaces would be for a hub, how many spaces would be at the individual sort of houses and at Centre West. I don't know if Alison Brown's maybe got any further information on that, but if she would be able to come in on that one, thanks.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Anderson. Just picking up on the parking question, so the existing parking at the Plaza and Olympia will be retained for shopping, and as David says, there will be parking for the Civic Hub and for the new residential homes, but we're not at that level of detail, and subject to this approval and subject to the Cabinet approval at Glasgow City Region in February, it allows us to get into that detail, and part of that will be around creating a parking strategy for the site, not just the Centre West site, but the wider town centre and how all of that interacts. So that will be part of a bigger piece that we'll be getting into that level of detail. Just perhaps picking back up on David's point around the vision and the master plan. The master plan is I suppose, you know, a vision of what is possible, as David says. One of the aspects that we're working with is market conditions, and obviously at the moment the remaining part of the shopping centre is currently up for sale, and we'll have a new partner to work with. And again, there might be changing aspects there where we could get back into a conversation with any new owner around, you know, the potential location of the Civic Hub. So again, all of that detail, you know, we're starting to move into that space. But this approval allows us to develop all aspects of the various component parts of the project.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just picking up another couple of points, Councillor Anderson. You had asked about the timescale for the new Civic Hub and its costs. So the costs for the new Civic Hub are contained within the costs that we've outlined in the table 1 within the report. The actual timescales of that, again, as Alison has pointed out, would be developed as we get into more detail in terms of developing a more detailed business case, but it won't begin before October 2027, as is detailed in the timeline within the report. You'd ask about contingency, and many of these projects we always build in an element of contingency. Again, sometimes costs can change depending on global conditions and market conditions, but we do try and build in contingency where we can within these projects. And the final point you raised there is about the amount of work that would be happening at both sides of the town centre and at Stuartfield Way. And yes, we will be looking as part of this development project and as part of the development of the Stuartfield Way project about the interrelationship between these projects and the likelihood, if any, for disruption, and how we would manage that as we would do in a normal way. Hope that answers your questions. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I was quite surprised to hear from Alison that there's a possibility that the Civic Hub might go back into Town Centre Park, because at the Community and Enterprise we were told it wasn't possible because the different levels of the ground. So it seems quite strange that now we might have a new partner who we don't know who it is, that it might happen now. So that's quite different from what we were told at Community and Enterprise.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Anderson. I think at Community and Enterprise, I raised the issue of a potential new partner and a conversation that could happen. And we need to have that conversation with the new partner, because hopefully they will invest in the town centre and not just be a sort of sitting manager. So, you know, I'm open to those conversations and to explore all opportunities. As part of the work that the team have done, we've got into some of the detail around the physical aspects of the site and the levels. It's not insurmountable, potentially will cost more, but that's getting, you know, we need to explore all the opportunities and develop the best proposition for the Civic Hub in response to the master plan and you know, comments that we've heard from the community and from elected members. So these conversations will continue. There will be further consultation on all aspects of the project that we see here, not just the Civic Hub, but the residential aspects as well, both with elected members and the wider community as this project develops and shapes up over time. But as I say, this approval allows us to get into the detail and explore all opportunities.
Can I just say, I think the point has been well made that when there are a number of moving parts, including who's going to own the private element of the town centre, then it's inevitable that any master plan that we're trying to agree with partners is going to be subject to some form of variation or change. What's not changing are the principles that underline it. The fact that we have to diversify the town centre's uses, densify the footfall that's in the town centre and use it to reinvent East Kilbride and give the town a town centre they can be proud of. The only thing that has failed at the first hurdle has been that absolutely woeful attempt by Councillor Anderson to undermine the goodwill that there is towards the most ambitious town centre regeneration plan in all of Scotland. And on the point about the City Deal project, can I just say, for 5 years we sat here where there was absolutely no progress on the Stuartfield Way project. The only thing that was rising during that period, if he wants to talk about costs rising, were the costs of the project itself. And we have now had to intervene by fundamentally changing the Stuartfield Way project, but that has, the benefit of which, that has allowed us to reinvest some of that resource into East Kilbride. And if this paper is endorsed today, we will back up the town centre master plan with £50 million of investment. That did not happen before. It's happening now for 5 years. We've been in power for half as long as that previous administration, where Councillor Anderson chaired the Community and Enterprise Committee, and we've achieved 10 times as much for East Kilbride. Are there any other questions on this paper? Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, just don't forget the years you were in power and you done nothing about the Stuartfield Way. You were in charge at the start.
I think we've put forward one of the biggest City Deal programmes in the entire region, and we're delivering on it. And if I might also say, if you want to talk about town centre plans failing at the first hurdle, I do remember sitting in this room and others and being presented with artists' impressions of what that civic centre site might look like. Nothing happened there. This is a programme that's actually making some progress. It will be good for the town. And fundamentally, we want a Team East Kilbride approach to it. We want a Team South Lanarkshire approach to it. We want to rally right round it. And maybe some of Councillor Anderson's SNP colleagues might want to have a word with them, because actually the engagement we've had across parties through the years has all been positive, and we've got a positive story to tell that can change the town and change the town for the good. Are there any other questions? John Anderson.
You didn't sit here, you sat in the Civic Centre along with all East Kilbride councillors when we brought forward a plan, and East Kilbride councillors quite rightly rejected it. A lot of East Kilbride councillors haven't had the opportunity because they don't sit in this committee or community and enterprise, so that's a big difference.
Let's move on, Chair.
Wow. Okay. Are we prepared to endorse the recommendations in this report if there's no other questions?
Agreed.
That will include a £50 million fund to back up the regeneration of East Kilbride. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
We are agreed. Well done. Can we move now to item 7 and can invite Ian Strachan to speak to this report on the polling scheme review?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Committee. Purpose of the report to provide an update to the Committee on the outcome of the recently concluded statutory review of the Council's polling scheme and seek Committee's approval to a revised polling scheme as set out in Appendix 1 to this report. Members will recall the September meeting of full Council considered a report to propose commencement of the statutory review of the polling scheme, and Council agreed delegate authority to this committee to consider further report today following completion of the public consultation exercise and approve a new polling scheme. We've summarised the outcome of the consultation exercise in 4.1. In general terms, and subject to certain changes set out in the report, we believe that the current polling scheme can accommodate the current population and housing development projections, recognising that there's a number of variables in connection with those. Feedback received at the time of the election and subsequently from those working at the election also didn't highlight any material issues with the scheme that was used back in July. As the committee will be aware, there's a number of polling places previously under the control of South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture, but have recently been transferred to various community groups, organisations, or will shortly be transferred. Where these organisations are willing to continue to allow the venue to be used as a polling place, then, provided it remains suitable, propose that this continues if, for whatever reason, that continued use was no longer practicable. For instance, if a venue was reconfigured such that it was no longer suitable as a polling place, then we would need to consider a suitable alternative. What I would just update the committee on is that it was identified last week that we were advised that the Trinity Parish Church Hall in Lark Hall is expected to close at the end of January. That hadn't been known at the time that the report was finalised and issued. The Church of Scotland advised that they might keep the halls open for community use in the short term. So today we propose to leave the report as is. We'll consider alternative options. One would be Mackenhall Primary School, which is already a polling place and could accommodate a couple more polling stations. I understand that Lark Hall Congregation Church might also be appropriate, and we've reached out to that also. And then going back to the recommendations, asking committee to that the contents of this report, including the outcomes of the statutory review, are noted, that the revised polling scheme set out in Appendix 1 is approved, and that authority is delegated to the Chief Executive to take all steps necessary to conclude matters relating to the review. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on that report? I'm not seeing any questions, so can I come to the can I come to the recommendations? Can we agree the report?
Agreed.
We're agreed. I'll come now to item 8, which is on an update on the council motion on Keep the Beat Alive, and Craig Ferguson is going to speak to this item. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. The report provides committee with an update on the position regarding the actions within the council motion Keep the Beat Alive, passed at council meeting on the 12th of June this year. Section 3 provides background on the diversity of the third sector and the range of sources of income the sector relies upon. Recognition of the important role of the third sector in South Lanarkshire in delivery of services, and also the valuable support provided to communities is listed at 3.2. Also at 3.2, the report explains the limitations in the Council's ability to support the sector because of the funding pressures impacting public services generally, and also notes any activity around this needs to work within the legal and regulatory framework within which the Council operates. A third sector process review will focus separately on the governance arrangements in place around grant funding and also the value obtained by the Council from the provision. And this review is referred to throughout the report. Section 4 of the report outlines the 5 actions taken forward as a result of the Council motion presented back in June and was supported by the third sector campaign called Keep the Beat Alive, and they're listed at 4.2 in the report. At 4.3 are updates provided on the progress made in each of the 5 actions. I'd highlight Action 3, engagement with VASLAN on the implementation of the third sector fair funding charter. And here there are opportunities for greater support to the sector around procurement training from SDP, for example, and also in reviewing the guidance in the provision of grants. However, scope to provide assurance around future funding levels is limited given the current financial environment within which we operate. In more detail on this is provided in Section 5 of the report and also in Appendix 2. The minute of the meeting of the Council from the 12th of June noted the report was submitted to a future meeting of the Executive Committee with outcome detailed discussions and considerations with VASLAN on the third sector fair funding charter, and this activity is outlined in more detail within Section 5. Moving on to Section 5, this provides a summary of the third sector fair funding charter, a charter developed by TSI Scotland Network and also the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations. The charter sets out 4 funding principles for the third sector with the aim of supporting improvements in the funding the sector receives from the public and also independent sectors. The 4 principles of the charter are set within Section 5.2. Appendix 2 of the report provides a position across each of the requirements of the charter. And for each requirement, a proposed position is presented together with the actions that have been taken forward in support of the individual requirements. Overall, the Council is complying with many elements of the charter, either in full or in part. There are some limitations in the ability of the Council to meet the full requirements of the charter, for example, in the provision of inflation uplifts for funding over a medium term. And these are all detailed within Appendix 2. The appendix also outlines the actions that can be taken to support the sector, including updating the Council's service review guidance, to emphasise for third sector involvement in review activity as part of wider engagement, and also a number of actions taken forward under the third sector process review, including evaluation reporting arrangements and also consideration of a sliding scale for covering the cost of overheads within projects. The motion required Council officers to engage with VASLAN on the ask of the Fair Funding Charter. These opportunities presented by the Fair Funding Charter, they have been discussed with VASLAN, but in addition to that, the challenges to the Council in meeting the individual requirements have been explained, principally around procurement and also finance. A final point of 5.7 is that VASLAN are keen to see an output from the engagement with the Council, and it's expected that Appendix 2 to the report will provide this. Section 7 confirms there are no financial implications from that within the Appendix 2. For the committee, back to Section 2, note the contents of the report are noted, and also the post position in relation to the requirements of the third sector fair funding charter and actions to support it, as outlined in Appendix 2, are agreed. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, folks. Can I ask if there are any questions on this report? And can I come to Councillor Robb?
Thanks very much, and thanks very much to the officers and our third sector partners for all their work on this, getting into the meat. There's clearly more work to be done as well through the third sector process review, so I think that'll be a really interesting piece of work. Third sectors are huge. Why it's called Keep the Beat Alive is because they're the beating heart of our communities. Without the third sector picking up some of the slack, and really it's a life-saving service as well. So I think our relationship with the third sector should be reflecting that, and hopefully more work can be done as well. I was going to ask a couple of questions. How will the third sector review be reported back, and what's the timescale for it, and how will the third sector be involved in the process review as well? And the last bit is about the living wage. On page 686, it talks about how we're limited in some of the things we can do around the living wage, but I wondered if we could accept a slight amendment to add in an action where the council can, in line with our community wealth building principles, where the grants are on our own gift, like Renewable Energy Fund grants or so on, where we could, if a third sector process review, could consider mandating the real living wage to reduce deprivation in line with the indicators for our community well-building strategy.
I'll maybe come back to Craig on that, and I might take some advice just on that suggestion as well. Sorry, Tom Little looking to come in. Tom?
I can certainly come in on the first couple of questions from Councillor Robb, if that suits, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Robb. Yep, I'm glad you're highlighting the work that's to come, because there's a lot of work still to be done in this area. And in terms of timelines and elected member involvement, the plan is at the moment is to take forward the work in the process review. We'll change the name, we'll get a better name for it. And we'll bring it, as we do with such reviews, before the PRSF, the terms of reference. We're aiming for February so we can get it kicked off as soon as possible. And once those terms of reference are agreed, we'll then we'll have a timeline within that, which we hope to bring back any report to committee that involves outcomes, policy changes, etc. Probably the first meeting after recess, summer recess, no later than that, certainly anyway. We're also very acutely aware of the interests of elected members in this area, so we'll be building into the timeline some interactions, you know, whether that be seminars, workshops, etc. So be assured on that. And in terms of the involvement of the third sector, they're closely involved. We've been doing some fundamental work up to now. I say we, not me, other better people than me have been doing work up to now in terms of scoping the horizon here and seeing where we are just now, working very closely with VASLAN and other parts of the third sector as part of that. And we will be absolutely hand in hand with them going forward, including them working with us on specific workshops, any work that needs to be done around data, etc. And just making sure that all views like that are taken on board. And I think that probably ticked off the questions I have for you.
Okay, Craig, can I come to yourself on the other point?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Robb. In relation to your question around living wage, that is a particular point the third sector process review will pick up, but just really in the context of grants. The procurement position is a little bit distinct from that in terms of what we consider within grants. Within procurement, essentially we had living wage essentially featuring within a number of our social care contracts within early years. And essentially there's a kind of well-established process there that operates on an annual basis where we uplift the early rates for these individual services on the condition of that of receipt of a Scottish Government funding that allows us to facilitate the increases each year in living wage. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Robb, for the question. In terms of that point around grants, what I would, your point is well made, and what I would maybe suggest is that we come back with a piece of work that looks at the steps that might be involved in that. And part of what I've got in mind is I thought that we should really consult with the grant receiving sector, which is by and large going to be that third sector, to understand that we're doing what they would be after in this, right? And that we're not maybe creating unforeseen difficulties for them. So with the Chair's indulgence, the offer is there to come back with a piece of work that looks at your request.
Thanks very much for all your responses. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think as long as it's considered as part of the third sector process review and the piece of work you're suggesting there, I'm content with that. And I would think it's just in line with our community wealth building. If we maximise our ability through things that we have a gift to do in our own grants that we hand out, I think that would be a good step forward. But like Paul said, make sure the voluntary sector, I think, who mostly pay the real living wage anyway, I think they would welcome that, but engage with them. But thanks all.
Okay, thanks. We'll take that forward, and I suppose could I just say, as the chair of the Community Wealth Building Commission and the Community Planning Partnership, that paper or versions of that paper and updates have been to both of those bodies as well. Can I come back to the recommendations? Can I ask that we agree the recommendations in the report? Agreed. We're agreed. Could I come now to our items for noting and come to item 9, which is an update on the 25-26 budget and the COSLA lobbying document. I'll come to Jackie Taylor. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This paper summarises the COSLA lobbying document in relation to the budget, and this was released in November 24, obviously before the announcement of the Scottish Budget. Section 4 summarises that lobbying document. It refers to rising local government budget gaps and also called for Scottish Government to provide local government with fair and flexible funding in that up-and-coming Scottish Budget. There was a number of asks that were detailed in that lobbying document, and they're covered in the bullets at section 4.3 for your information. I should say that a link to the lobbying document is provided within the report as well. Some of the key figures from that lobbying document are picked up from section 4.6 onwards, noting that last year the settlement for local government was flat cash, and that flat cash couldn't be something that is affordable within within local government going forward. The document itself asked for an additional £700 million in revenue funding for local government, excluding any funding for national insurance, and in the capital space asked for £160 million of extra uncommitted funding as well as part of the budget settlement. At section 4.10, council tax is picked up in that the document asked again for no repeat of last year's council tax freeze. That's a very brief summary of the lobbying document. As you know, we have now had the Scottish Government published, and a number of the areas that are addressed in that lobbying document have been detailed. We don't yet have our own settlement for our own specific funds that we'll receive from the Scottish Government until tomorrow, and at that point we'll be able to understand better how South Lanarkshire's position will be following that settlement. In terms of the recommendations of the report, this is a report for noting, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? Could you indicate now? And could I come to Councillor Loudon?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the report, Jackie. This is about 4.7, where it's talking about employers' national insurance contributions, the changes to those in the UK government. Excuse me. And I suppose this it relates to what Councillors Brown and Fagan were saying earlier about local government really needing information from central government. I'm really concerned. We're looking at up to a sort of 2 million, I think was the estimate, shortfall for the public sector on this, based on what the UK government have said that they'll cover, and based on what bodies like COSLA, the police, the fire service, etc., have reported their actual costs here are going to be. I've seen estimates for a few other councils in terms of what our direct costs are going to be. I think it's including North Lanarkshire and Glasgow have published those. I haven't seen any calculations from us yet. I just wonder if the financial implications for South Lanarkshire have been worked out in terms of this tax rise and when we're going to see them.
Jackie? Jackie?
Thank you. At this point in time, the Scottish Budget hasn't actually allocated any funding for the national insurance contributions, and we will await our allocation as and when that comes through. As I mentioned earlier, we also don't have our own specific allocations generally for South Lanarkshire, and that will come in through our settlement tomorrow. In terms of the costs for national insurance for the council, we have had some early indications of costs, and in total it would be around £15 million for South Lanarkshire.
Can you just ask a supplementary in that, Chair?
Okay, take the supplementary. I'm going to bring in the Chief Exec in a second. Take the supplementary first. Yeah.
Thanks. Just to confirm, Jackie, the 15 million we're talking about, is that direct cost to the council as an employer? We're not talking about commission services such as early years and care homes and things as well?
That's correct. At this point in time, I don't think we've had any approaches from any of our commission service providers yet around any extra costs for them.
Okay, thank you.
I'll bring in the Chief Exec, but I would just make the point that is the 15 million, not assuming any support with the cost. That is the element that we've still to establish. Paul?
Okay, and partly what I was going to say was what the Chair has just covered. There is a specific approach that's been taken by the Scottish Government in dealing with this. So I'm aware that they have kept as part of their budget settlement an amount of money which relates to the increase in NI, but they haven't allocated to councils money within the budget settlement and within the monies that Jackie's going to get tomorrow in relation to South Lanarkshire Council as it relates to the cost of that NI increase. What they have done instead is said that they're going to turn and have discussions with the Treasury about the level of money that's been allocated to Scotland and some of the implications of the Scottish position, right, to use their wording around having a higher degree of the workforce included within the public sector. So there is another dimension to this which is going to happen. And in terms of information from that, we'll feed that out as Jackie brings back updates to committee on the 2025-26 budget. Thanks, Councillor Loudon.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come now to Councillor Brown?
Thanks very much, Chair. It was really on the same issue and developing the matter of the non-council costs, if you like, because it's not really just commission services directly, it's also things that the voluntary sector in its various capacities have to look at. There was a programme on the television I just caught a bit of this morning, was relating I think, to learning support groups. I think it was in England primarily there, but the point was just the same, where there was the support from charitable organisations, voluntary sector organisations towards learning support was going to be badly hit by the national insurance changes here. So I think it's important we actually have a bit of a feel of this. Do we have anything resembling any kind of figure as to what this might cost, not just for commission services, but for the voluntary sector in our area more generally? I appreciate that's a little bit of a fuzzy figure, but do we have at least an indication of direction there? I think it's important that goes into the discussion that the Chief Executive has talked about.
I'm going to bring in the Chief Exec.
No, we don't have a figure.
Do we have even the beginnings of an estimate on it? Because I think we must have a vague idea of some sort here.
Okay, that is a figure, is one that will first emerge, I would imagine, from that commissioned services sector. We're aware of what we take from them currently. At present, we head towards a position of, without money to cover that, you'd be in a situation where you'd be able to procure a lesser level of service, right? I know that. What I don't have, Councillor Brown, are access to their costs or an ability to start to work through the calculation, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Okay, I take that point absolutely. If I may come back finally on that one. I think it's important that we do remember that this is not just commission services. This is also other voluntary sector inputs, if you like, that support the work that the council does. And when the discussions, presumably through COSLA, continue to take place on this one, perhaps that could be just borne in mind, and we do our best to flesh that element of it out.
Councillor Brown, your point's well made. It's one that local government and COSLA are aware of and that is being picked up and discussed. I just don't have a gauge at the moment in terms of a figure, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Okay, could I come to Councillor Ross?
Yes, thanks very much, Joe. I was just wondering, how does this item relate to the statement from COSLA yesterday that said that they were agreeing with the Scottish Government on the budget, and that they were going to go together, both of them, to the Westminster Government to see if, in fact, they could get some movement on the NI contributions. I'm just wondering, there seems to be an agreement here between COSLA and the Scottish Government on a number of items regarding the budget. And I'm just wondering if that update is pertinent at this time. Thanks.
I'll maybe come back in some of the politics around that, but I'll bring in the Chief Exec before I do it.
Okay, so just to go back, Councillor Ross, to the point Jackie was making a few minutes ago, we're at a position in the budget process between the Cabinet Secretary's budget being announced at a Scotland-wide level last week and the council getting its settlement figure. So the purpose of having this in was, in terms of providing an update on the budget process, to because we had access to that information at that point in time, say this was these were the asks from COSLA around the Scottish budget, which is in the paper there and it's laid out in pretty blunt detail. What I don't have at this point in time is a gauge in terms of how that impacts on this council, or the full detail of how it impacts on the Scottish public sector and local government at this point. That detail still becoming available. So again, we would pick up that as part of the update that comes back through committee from Jackie as we go through the budget process. But the purpose of this was just to give an outline to committee of local government's ask. I'm not in a position personally at this point in time to give you the full detail of how reality has come in against that. Thanks.
Can I ask a supplementary, Joe?
Yeah.
I mean, it would appear that a number of these asks of local government have been met by the statement from COSLA. And I don't want to get political here, but you know, we're discussing something here that's a wee bit out of date, and we do have an updated position. And it would be nice if we were actually getting the full story just at the right time, and probably not discussing something that is gone by the board now. Thanks.
Right. The purpose in bringing this paper was to keep the committee advised the progress of those the budget lobbying process. It is the case that the paper was published and requested, and in the meantime, the Scottish budget has taken place. Because of the record financial settlement the Scottish Government has been given, there is more money on the table to play with, and we are seeing a large increase in public spending. And actually, the key thing that is important for me to emphasise, because I do it every opportunity, is that we need to see that core budget increasing. And it feels like this year we've actually made progress with the government around the core budget, because what we've seen year after year is the core budget declining. They tell us they've got a record settlement, it unravels within weeks. There are, as I said earlier in the meeting, there are certain unknowns that we need to resolve to understand what's actually going to happen with that core budget, and then what the impact will be in our own revenue budget strategy. One of them we discussed earlier was around education and what are the potential implications of what we are signing up to and the engagement we're having with the Scottish Government. The other is the one that's just been raised a few moments ago around national insurance, where we know there's a cost to the council, we know there's support coming to the council, but we don't know what the quantity of that support is. And what we have agreed unanimously at COSLA is that we don't think local government should be footing the bill. We think that should be coming from the support that is provided by government at a national level. And one of the difficulties we have is that on top of because this has been kind of accounted for separately, we're actually not clear ourselves in what the discussions are that are taking place between the Scottish and UK governments. We've had a figure that's been that's been quoted in the press, and I've seen quoted in a letter from the Cabinet Secretary, but we don't know what sits behind that. And so, in common with lots of other public services in Scotland, we are pushing for that clarity. What is important to me is that we make sure when it comes to any Barnett consequentials arising from the UK budget and any support for national insurance, that we are getting our fair share, because every bit of support we get comes off. It reduces that £15 million exposure. So those are the two big areas where we need to have clarity on what are the ring-fence commitments or directed expenditure commitments that we've been expected to sign up to, and how do we make sure they are fully funded, and what's the level of national insurance support. And the sooner we get clarity on that, the sooner we can progress with arriving at assumptions that allow us to set a budget for the coming year. Now, I don't know if that's a legacy, but I'll come back to Councillor Loudon. Is her hands there? Okay, Councillor Loudon.
Thanks, Chair. No, it wasn't a legacy. It was just to come back on Councillor Brown's point about NI contributions on the third sector. I'm a wee bit astonished, to be honest, that he's now talking about this. These implications are exactly what our group were trying to establish with our amendment to his Disclosure Scotland's motion at full council, and he'd rejected that part of it. But I'm pleased he's now making these really important points, and I thank you for coming round to that point. I would hope, regardless of that amendment being rejected, that the Council would be reaching out to our third sector and the partnership, the really vital and crucial partnerships that we have that are not commission services but are still partnerships within the Council, and that we're having those conversations with them as part of the wider discussions that we're having with them that were detailed on a previous item. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, can I just make 2 points of my own here? Firstly, just one of the key asks was around supporting social care. I think that in that instance, funding was expected to be channeled through the National Health Service, but I just I wonder if Jackie or Paul are able just to maybe give us an update on the situation in relation to social care, given the acute pressures they are facing. And do you know what, I'll leave it with that point of social care, actually. Okay.
Listen, Chair, I'll go first, and if Jackie has better information, I'll throw the floor open to bring her in. I'm aware there was an amount of money of £190 million which was made available through NHS. Part of that is expected to be directed to social care. I believe part of it is to commission further service, in part with an eye on reducing levels of delayed discharge. And I believe part of it as well relates to an initiative which is hospital at home. So both of those things, I do think, start to step onto the territory of social care. I'll defer to Jackie if she's got any further information.
Yeah, the additional information I can add to that is, as part of the local government pot of money, we will continue to get support for maintaining real living wage payments around adult and children's social care. That's what we would expect. However, there is obviously a home for that to go to. If I can just supplement what Paul said on that.
Okay. I think the only other point I was going to make is, and it is included in some of those COSLA statements that you've seen in the press over the past couple of days, there is good news in this budget because overall public spending is rising as a result of the Chancellor's settlement. One budget is not going to undo years of damage and degradation of our public services and of local government, and we still have a multi-year budget gap to face up to. So there will be tough decisions ahead, but hopefully the outlook now is a bit more positive than it had been in years gone by, and we can start to rebuild public services for people in South Lanarkshire. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands on that, so can we note that item and come to the next item, which is item 10 on the Marmot Places for South Lanarkshire, and Jen Kerr is going to speak to this item. Jen.
Hi, thanks everybody. I'm Jen Kerr, the Community Engagement Manager. Excuse me, I've got a cough again. The purpose of this report is to inform the Executive Committee of the Marmot approach to place and provide an update on South Lanarkshire's, I'm pleased to say, very successful application to participate in the Scottish Marmot programme alongside Aberdeen City and North Ayrshire as part of the first Marmot Places pilot programme in Scotland. As the report notes, life expectancy is no longer rising in Scotland, and we have seen a huge widening of health inequalities. Average living standards measured by household incomes have returned to pre-2010 levels of growth, and they have fallen since 2019. People living in our most deprived areas experience poor health longer and are dying younger than those living in the least deprived areas, and we can see that here in South Lanarkshire as well. Indeed, Section 3.7 outlines some very concerning population-level indicators of health and living standards that are now showing consistent trends at a Scotland-wide level. Being a Marmot Place, we will have the support and assistance of the University College London's Institute of Health Equity, led by Professor Sir Michael Marmot, who is a leading global health institute expert and has worked with more than 45 local authorities across England and Wales, the NHS, businesses, and the community and voluntary sector to improve and reduce health inequalities. Notably, the Coventry examples is a really great one that's had some really great successes. A Marmot Place recognises that health and health inequalities are mostly shaped by the conditions in which people were born, grow, live, work, and age. This is a whole systems approach. Section 5 of the report notes that our vision for South Lanarkshire is that we want to be a place that prides itself on the use of evidence to create this best possible environment just referred to, for our population to live happy, thriving, healthy lives and reduce any negative impacts of the social determinants of poor health. It notes that we'll work to align our partnership's resources and shared goals of commissioning for health equity, joint resourcing for prevention, through the Community Planning Partnership and other partners by improving our ability to understand, measure, and direct our interventions and links across policy areas, that link together through broader goals to reduce poverty and inequality. This isn't something one organization can do on its own. We all hold a bit of this jigsaw and we need to link that together. The report outlines the solid foundations that we have here in South Lanarkshire for participation. We have all the building blocks to move this agenda forward, and we have a unique situation of a large rural area and dense urban populations. I would note, though, that Marmot and this pilot and the opportunity to participate in it is an 18-month program starting in January 2025, but this will be a starting point with all partners gaining the knowledge and decision-making skills that will be required to mainstream this approach long-term and look after the health of the population of South Lanarkshire. Community planning partners are currently developing joint priorities for discussion with the Institute of Public Health, and we are considering how to establish a collaborative evidence base here in South Lanarkshire of poverty and health inequity. One that is accessible, referenced, and used. Community planning, governance and briefing structures for elected members are also under consideration, and a proposal will be provided at a future executive meeting. We're really excited about this opportunity that the Marmot program is bringing to South Lanarkshire and to the incredible expertise of the Institute for Health Equity and the support that brings us. In conclusion, the Executive Committee is asked to note that South Lanarkshire Council, in partnership with the NHS Lanarkshire and the Community Planning Partnership, is one of the 3 Scottish local authorities that will be participating in the Scottish Marmot Place pilot. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions in this paper? Could you indicate now? I'm not seeing any questions. So can I just, for my own part, just thank everybody, all our officials, not just in South Lanarkshire Council, but in our partners in NHS Lanarkshire who have been part of this successful bid to put South Lanarkshire in a kind of nation-leading position as one of only 3 pilot authorities. It's exciting work. It's positive, and it's certainly been well received across the Community Planning Partnership and elsewhere, and we hope it is successful, and ultimately we hope it makes a difference when it comes to those evidence-based interventions that we want to make to change people's lives and to realise some of the ambitions of that Christie Commission that is now a number of years old, and it can't just gather dust on a shelf. We've got to put early intervention into practice on the ground. So thank you, Jen, and thank you to everybody else that's worked on that. Can I come now to item 11, which is an update in the National Care Service, and can I ask Suman Sengupta to speak to that item? Suman?
Good morning, members. Thank you for that. So this report provides an update to the Executive Committee on the National Care Service Scotland Bill. As set out within the background section of Section 3, the bill was published in June 22, providing for the establishment of an NCS under the responsibility of Scottish ministers. It has proceeded through stage 1 and is currently going through the stage 2 of the parliamentary process. At 3.4, as committee members will recall, there had been a call for views from the Scottish Parliament's Health, Social Care and Sport Committee with relation to the draft amendments that the Scottish Government had brought forward as part of stage 2 of the bill. The Council had agreed a response which was submitted, and the 3.4 highlights the link to the website which provides all of the submissions made, including that from South Lanarkshire. Section 4 then provides the current position. So on the 14th of November, the Minister for Social Care, Mental Health and Sport confirmed that the Scottish Government did not now intend to start stage 2 consideration of the bill on the 26th of November as planned, and that new stage 2 dates would be agreed between the Minister for Parliamentary Business and the Scottish Parliament in due course. Subsequent to that, COSLA provided the response, the link of which is provided at 4.2, and at 4.3 it highlights that on the 21st of November the Minister delivered a further statement to the Scottish Parliament updating the Scottish Government's position. As has been noted under Section 8, the development of an NCS had been identified as a risk within the Council's risk register, and that will be reviewed based on the developments to date and the information that will come out through the coming weeks and months in this regard. I would take members back to Section 2 in terms of the recommendation and happy to answer any questions if I at all can.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions on this item? And can I come to Robert Brown?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I know I sound like a broken record on this particular issue, but it's one which from the beginning I think I had major concerns about, as the Liberal Democrat group and party have had more generally. And I think we're now in the position where the thing is probably in its last dying echoes, and quite rightly so. But the Minister's statement, which is referred in the thing, is not quite exactly saying, as the initial report said, that the National Care Service national power takeover thing is scrapped. It's really saying we're kind of continuing and it's going to be delayed. I'd like to just to bring before the committee one particular point that came out of the Minister's statement, where she said about, in the interest of transparency, we collectively spend £5.75 billion on social care services. Now, that's to be taken against, to some degree, the £1 billion plus cost of the bureaucracy of the National Care Service that was being proposed. And these figures came out, of course, from the parliamentary committees. The enormous waste of money on this particular project is really quite scandalous against the need that we have for primarily investment in local care services. I do hope that the government will take on board the views that have come really from all over the place, from COSLA, from officials, from the trade unions and from others, that this is not the way to go about the thing. Care is a local service, should be delivered locally, and I do think the lesson's beginning to get through, but hasn't fully got through even to the government, even at this late stage. With that, I'm more than happy, obviously, to note the report.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Councillor Walker?
Thanks, Chair. Just to kind of clarify to some extent, I mean, obviously, I agree with most of the comments that Robert's made, but in terms of our position relating back to the Feely report and also the Kirsty review that is now, that we mentioned earlier on, those principles still hold. We have always been in favour of actually establishing a system whereby we've got consistency and quality of outcomes across social care. And that was one of the main objectives of the Feely report and Kirsty. And we would say, Kirsty, sorry, and we would still support that in terms of taking this forward, because we think that that would be positive in terms of moving forward, for example, with a national social work agency. So just to clarify on that point, and we would urge as they go forward that that's what they would start to deliver, rather than what's previously been happening. It's turned into, a land grab from local authorities. That was never ever the original intention of the Feely report. Or the whole idea around the National Care Service. So it was just to clarify that. In relation to what we were talking about earlier in terms of social care, I know there is an allocation, and there's been an additional allocation to the Barnett consequentials within the 3.4 million additional monies. And certainly what we would be advocating that does go as far as possible. It will be devolved to IGBs in terms of adults and social care, that we look very carefully and targeting that spending where it's needed, whereas, of course, that's in terms of recruitment, the front line, and that local authorities will have the autonomy to do that. And as I say, it's worth saying again, it is the largest increase in terms of money going to the devolved authorities since devolution. It's 47.7 billion plus the 3.4 billion, and also includes a 2.8 billion for day-to-day spending and 610 million for capital investment. So, as you were saying earlier on, Chair, there is a substantial increase in the money that we've got to play around with. What our priority should be making sure it actually gets to the people that need it. Via social care, via education, that we actually get it down to the front line and we have autonomy as an IGB, as a local authority, and how we target that money in relation to priority needs within South Lanarkshire. But it was just to clarify that point. We have always taken the position that consistency of performance, quality and outcomes should be general across Scotland, rather than the postcode differences that we have at the moment. Thanks, Chair. It was just to clarify that.
Thank you. I appreciate the the comment. I won't ask Suman to respond to the political points that have been made there. I don't think that would be appropriate. But the comments that have been made are on the record. And there are certainly elements of reforms that we would seek to salvage, and I think that would be beneficial. But the way in which the National Care Service has evolved is not something that COSLA, local government or our trade union partners can continue to support. And I think the government have now got that message. Okay, I'm going to, in relation to the remaining items for noting, items 12 to 16, unless anyone wishes to receive a particular report on any of those items, would the committee be content to note them on block?
Agreed.
Oh, no, hang on, I've got people who wouldn't. So can I come to Councillor Allison in the first instance, sorry?
Chair, a couple of points. First of all, on page 106, 4.3, you're talking about the Hamilton Town Centre and the work that is being done there. Constituent has contacted a local councillor regarding what's actually happening there, because the report does not really concur with what they believe is actually the current status. And I'm just looking, one thing I'm looking for more information, because the company involved says there is no agreement. They have a long-term lease, and they believe the council has not engaged, we'll use the word at all, regarding these issues. So although we cannot discuss the details, what action are the council going to take to actually give the tenant some comfort? Because he cannot move on at the moment until these discussions, we don't need to know what they are, but that discussions have taken place. He has already lost.
Right. Could I maybe intervene here for a second, because I can see other people are going to cut in a second. There are two other points before I come back to that, and I'm just going to establish if there is a particular paper we want to hear a report on. So there's an issue here with item 12. Could I come to Councillor Johnson-Dempsey?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's on item 14. I think the societal impacts of artificial intelligence are so great that we should definitely hear a report on it.
It's item 12.
Right, okay. That being the case, I'll take item 12 and item 14, and well, can we agree to note the remaining items on block at this point?
Agreed.
Agreed. Right. Could I come then to item 12 and ask Alison Brown to speak to that paper? I could come to Councillor Allison afterwards, but I'm just conscious there are elements of what have been raised there that I don't think it would necessarily be appropriate to raise in a committee. But over to you, Alison.
Thank you. This paper provides an update on a range of commercial opportunities being explored. The committee has noted or approved various papers over this year around town centre regeneration, the potential redevelopment of Civic Centre in East Kilbride, resulting in a potential capital receipt. We've spoken this morning about East Kilbride Shopping Centre and Centre West and the creation of development platforms for residential development. In the case of Hamilton, we're preparing proposals for the delivery of a new redevelopment of the New Cross Centre and the potential sale of the Regent Centre, which we hold the ground lease but is privately owned in terms of the actual shops. That is currently on the market, and our surrounding sites at the rear of Regent Centre provide an opportunity to create a wider development opportunity for residential development. In terms of inward investment, a refreshed approach was approved at Community and Enterprise Resources Committee in February, and since then we've undertaken a dedicated website which has been launched. Live discussions are also underway regarding a number of sites, including Langlands West and Shawfield. Land and property market analysis has also been undertaken, which identifies opportunities for commercial development. This piece of work aligns with activity being undertaken across Glasgow City region, where a new regional project is proposed to create industrial and commercial space across member authorities. And the Council has submitted 5 projects totalling over £17 million, which could unlock investment in the region of £75 million. In recent months, we've had a more proactive approach to film and TV opportunities and have secured a number of filmings, including a TV commercial in this building itself. In terms of renewable energy, we're continuing to explore a number of initiatives, including heat networks, battery storage and solar array. And in relation to heat networks, discussions are continuing with Scottish Water in respect of taking waste heat from the Bothwell Road area and utilising that infrastructure for heat network for this building and the wider estate. So taking you back to the recommendation, the committee is asked to note the activity undertaken.
Right. I'll come to Councillor Allison and then afterwards I'll come to Councillor Rob. So, Alec.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Right. Some concerns in page 106 about the report regarding the New Cross Centre. Not all the tenants have left, and indeed there is one there that has a long-term lease and that there are no agreements with. An email did come in, if I can get the proper bit here. To date, representatives from the Council have failed to engage at any practical level regarding compensation. Now, whereas I do not need to know...
I think, Alec, I'm being advised here by our officers to intervene and to stop, to prevent you from raising this specific case.
So I cannot raise what discussions are planned for the business, how we are going, not the content of the reports, but the fact that discussions will take place.
I think there are two separate issues here, which is to get an update on what is happening at the New Cross, which I think our officers would be happy to provide. But there is a separate point which I think relates to one business in particular that our officers are well aware of. Now, I can see the monitoring officer coming in. I'm going to take his advice before deciding what to do next, Alec. Ian.
I think, and I think, Councillor Allison, you weren't proposing to go into any detail, although I know you were starting to read out an email. I think officers could provide an update in terms of the generality, in terms of negotiations, discussions, which I think is maybe what you're looking for, but obviously would not wish to go into anything which could be detail about individual businesses.
In particular, I was looking for the Council to ensure that the communication with the tenants takes place. This does not seem to be happening at the moment.
I'm going to bring in the Chief Exec.
Listen, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Allison. The information I have, Councillor Allison, is that communication is taking place. Now, following this meeting, following your comments, I'll take that up with David and with Stephen to ensure that that's moving forward. We just understand, and I think we both do, that we can't go into the details of a case, and I need to protect the Council's position in that. So thank you for your understanding.
Thank you, Alec. Can I come now to Kirsten Robb?
Thank you. Thanks for the report, Alison. Just on the renewable side of things, I've just seen what opportunities there might be or could be included in discussions when wind farms come up for repowering. I know wind farm developers pay a tiny proportion of their profits to local communities, so I wondered if there was any opportunities for the council and communities to have public-public partnerships and increase community shared ownership through when farms come up for repowering, to renegotiate terms, to link payments more closely to profits that they're actually making and explore these public-public partnerships. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Robb. We are entering that phase of sort of repowering, and absolutely there is an opportunity to garner further benefits from communities. Some of the Section 75 agreements for wind farms extend for a number of years, go back to sort of 2008 and 2009, and arguably are out of date in terms of where profits have moved. So indeed, I actually have a meeting next week with a wind farm operator on this very point, and looking to maximise the opportunities. So happy to bring a paper back on that in due course.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on this paper? Okay, that being the case, can we note the paper? And I'll come now to item 14 on artificial intelligence and the council. Invite Murray Husband to speak to that paper. Murray.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. So the purpose of this position report is to update the Executive Committee on the strategic implications and emerging applications of artificial intelligence within local government. The background in Section 3 describes how AI has developed and how it presents challenges and opportunities across the public sector. Paragraph 3.3 provides a high-level definition of some types of AI. This list is not exhaustive, but does give you a background of the key areas that we see before us. The first four have been around for some time. The last two, generative AI and large language models, are the ones in the news recently around the likes of ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot. Section 3.4 provides information on some of the challenges around potential bias and the related ethical considerations of using AI. For the Council, it's important to note the risk is that without careful oversight, AI could reinforce existing inequalities rather than alleviate them. Further, the ethical implications of AI extend beyond bias to include concerns around privacy, autonomy and the potential for job displacement. AI is a key thread within any wider digital transformation work and is seen as a potential enabler for change and transformation for service delivery. Section 4 in the report goes on to call out some examples of AI already deployed within the Council and in use. Again, this is not exhaustive, and I know there are ongoing activities across resources using or exploring technology that uses AI. Section 5 of the report details examples of the opportunities that have been identified across the wider sector in the UK, with a full list of examples included in Appendix 1. Section 6 moves on to the challenges, as AI is not without risk and challenge. 6.2 details the challenge around data, which is probably one of the higher priority areas, both because it underpins more than just AI, and also because it's probably one of the ones with the longest time to progress. Pure data quality and staff data literacy impact AI's effectiveness to work specifically within our local context. 6.3 talks about funding, so we understand the financial envelope in which we operate, and securing adequate funding is another major challenge for AI projects within the public sector. AI initiatives typically require upfront investment in technology, infrastructure and talent, which can be difficult to justify if the benefits are longer term or not directly linked with savings. 6.4 calls out challenges around skills as a critical barrier to AI adoption within the public sector, as a shortage of skilled professionals with expertise is a common one across the sector. It's important that we understand existing staff may lack the necessary training to work effectively with AI tools, creating a skills gap that hinders further deployment. And without addressing this gap, the public sector risks falling behind in the adoption of technologies. 6.5 talks about the ethics and bias concerns around AI and barriers that may bring. Decisions can have a wide-reaching impact in society, so AI systems are only as good as the data they're trained on, and if this data is biased at the outset, the outcomes can be unfair or discriminatory. Finally, in section 6.9, the report talks about digital exclusion, and it's a significant challenge for this authority and AI in general across the public sector. For staff, exclusion can result from the lack of access to necessary technology, inadequate digital literacy or insufficient training to be effectively engaged with AI tools. On the resident side, digital exclusion is a major concern, particularly for vulnerable groups such as the elderly, low-income individuals and those in rural areas without access to the internet or the skills needed to interact with AI-driven public services. Addressing digital exclusion is therefore crucial to ensuring the utilisation of AI benefits all members of the community and does not exacerbate the digital divide. Section 7 then talks about some of the next steps that the organisation is looking to take around AI. These steps don't preclude resources undertaking targeted work in this area, and there is commitment in place to do so within the developing guidance and governance within the organisation. These next steps reflect the challenges and opportunities described within the report. And finally, under employee implications, it's worth noting that AI has the potential to impact employees both negatively and positively, and it's recognised that employees and unions and members are consulted appropriately where there is uncertainty or potential for impact. If I can then refer you back to recommendations in section 2, the content of the report is noted, the activities being undertaken by other authorities, which are summarised in section 5 and appendix 1 are noted, and that the next steps proposed in section 7 are also noted. Happy to take any questions.
Okie dokie. If there are any questions in this paper, could you indicate now? I'll come to Councillor Cal Johnson Dempsey.
Thanks, Chair. 6.5, ethics and bias is listed as a challenge. I believe this is more than just a challenge, it is a massive risk. We've seen examples in government around the world where garbage in has led to garbage out, from automated criminal sentencing systems that have given harsher prison sentences to people of colour, because that's what judges had done before, to welfare fraud systems that highlight immigrants and disabled people more often for investigation, because that's what human administrators had done before. And this example is obviously particularly relevant to us because there's locally delivered social security, such as housing benefit and council tax reduction. We need to be cognisant of the massive risks with any system that we bring in. And I'm glad that Murray brought this up in his report, although I feel it needs big flashing neon lights around it because it is such a risk. I'd really appreciate if members interested could get a session with greater detail on how we intend to use these technologies, and in particular how we will mitigate these ethical risks. I know from discussions with some other members that they would also like that. And a question which sort of leads on from those comments. Article 22 of the EU GDPR, which is retained in UK law, states that data subjects shall have the right not to be subject to decision based solely on automated processing, including profiling, which produces legal effects concerning him or her, or similarly significantly affects him or her. Obviously, this is to avoid computer says no scenarios. How do we currently process such requests from data subjects, be they employees or residents? And should we review how we accept and manage these requests in light of any increased automated processing? Thanks.
Okay, Murray, just some philosophical questions in there as well, but I think yeah. Over to you.
Yeah, we'll do our best. Thank you for the points, Councillor. So I think one of the reasons for bringing this paper to committee was just to show that this is kind of happening, right? So this is not something that's going to pass us by, and you're absolutely right with the concerns around the ethics and bias that are potentially inherent with some areas of AI. It's also worth noting that there's elements of AI that does not exist, and AI can be a power of good in terms of automation and improving officer efficiency and effectiveness and improving the outcomes for residents. So there's definitely a balance to be had about where AI is applied. It's probably worth noting as well that we are not alone in this across the sector. Work is underway to understand the impacts of AI. We work closely with the Scottish Local Government Digital Office around how we approach this. We're working with other councils about how they're approaching this. We are very early on in the journey around this, and really this paper is there to kind of put a marker down to say we are making, we're looking at this and looking to make conscious decisions about where we apply this in a safe and sensible way that doesn't bring in those areas of concern that you raised earlier. In terms of the point around a session on more detail around this, I'm happy to put something in place to do that.
Okay, we'll come back to some kind of session next year, as it will be in the new year. Yeah. Okay. Can I come to Margaret Walker?
Thanks, Chair. Just firstly, I would certainly echo some of the comments my colleague made around ethics and bias, but the first thing that jumps out at me here is obviously the impact on jobs. If you are automating more and more functions, general day-to-day functions, it's going to have an impact on jobs, and some of it is going to end up being cost-driven as well. So one of the assurances I would be looking for is what will the provision be in terms of training and redeveloping people to be able to function within the organisation. And obviously there can be positives. I don't want to sound totally negative here. There can be positives. It could free up people's time to do more interesting things, to develop their job more. So I'm not being entirely negative here, but AI can be a force for good, or it can be cost-driven to cut down the number of human beings you actually need to function as an organisation. And I'm not saying that would be the primary goal within South Lanarkshire Council, but when you look out at the private sector, that's a very, very scary proposition. So I would hope that we would get, kind of regular monitoring and evaluation information about how it is going to impact on jobs and what the provisions will be for people affected by that. And my second big concern is there's becoming a greater and greater distance between a public-facing service and the public. particularly if you look at how things have developed over the past few years, you know, after COVID, working at home. I know there is an ongoing review just now within the Performance and Scrutiny Committee to give us information on just exactly how that's impacted on the services that we provide in terms of how we work now as opposed to how we did years ago, or pre-pandemic rather. And the development of AI could actually move that on significantly. And if you have kind of, you know, bots and automated virtual assistants, and it becomes harder and harder for the people that we're providing the service to actually speak to a human being or get a service from a human being. So it's no accident that this should be included in the risk register. And I know within the Strategic Commission plan, it has been added as a new risk factor. That's right, isn't it, Suman? Yeah. And I think it's important that it comes, regular reports come back to this committee in terms of what the impact of this is, because it's certainly, I would say, as a priority, it's going to have an implication on jobs, and we need to be aware how those people are going to be impacted and respond accordingly. As I say, there's good and bad things to it, but my experience of AI was when I tried to set up a new gas and electricity account, and believe me, it was nervous breakdown time, and I never got to speak to a human being. But I know it's going to improve. Thanks.
Thanks. I think I'll come to Councillor Brown in just a second, but I would say that the employee implications in Section 8, I think there's maybe an argument for, as we're looking at maybe a session or we're looking at bringing more information forward, actually what are our looping personnel services into that, and some of the professional networks around human resources and local government. Can I come to Councillor Robert Brown?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just really to, I think I'm supposed to echo the point that Margaret Walker was making about the digital exclusion end, because I certainly come across people from time to time. I was talking to a lady at the Community Council just a couple of days ago who was going on about the difficulties of getting a blue badge application through without, you know, IT literacy. I think we've got to have provision in place for the admittedly smaller and reducing number of people who don't have IT facilities or don't have IT skills to be able to actually access normal forms of one sort or another effectively and without huge time delays on telephones, which is part of the issue too. Not a unique issue for us, but it applies to a lot of other organisations as well. And then there's the issue, I think, really of people who are not satisfied with the response they're getting from the system, if you like. There's got to be an ability to talk to a human being at some point along the process here. And I don't think that either this council or other organisations have been particularly brilliant at trying to put in place that residue capacity, if you like, for dealing with these sort of things effectively for people who feel probably fairly significantly excluded from the system.
Okay. I don't know if there's anything you want to pick up on that, Murray, but I think there are points that have been made that we will reflect on and take away. If there are no other questions, can we agree to note that report? Item 17 is urgent business. There have been no items of urgent business intimated, so can I, at this point, bring the meeting to a close? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, really wasn't going to come in because I thought, well, people have read the paper, but there's been so much sort of gloom and doom and sometimes angst today. I think if people would just consider looking really at item 15 and read it right through, and it's developing an age-friendly South Lanarkshire, a great place to grow older. It's the best news story in the papers today. 2.5 years we were stagnating, but with the help of our leader, Joe, we have moved on apace, and now South Lanarkshire is actually a trailblazer, not just Scotland but UK-wide. We're asked our opinions and all the various things, and we've had complete support from Joe and the officers, Christine Calder, Katrina Mason, who is the chair of the organisation for us here. So I think it was just to say, to put us out on a wee happy note. Yes, right. I am. Yes. When I first sat here, I was a very young thing. Now I know what I am, so that's fine. And believe me, it's coming to everybody. Quicker than you think. Anyway, Thank you very much, Joe, and thank you. And I hope people do read this and that we go from strength to strength. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 15, if anyone wants to read it, as Eileen says, South Lanarkshire is the first UN-accredited age-friendly community in Scotland. Right, OK, I was just going to now bring the meeting to a close and wish everyone all the very best for the festive period ahead. Thank you.